Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is your host, Alfie Deer, the Streetz Talk podcast. Today, we got a special guest in the building today. Back here with us with season 2, Mr. Brian Belly of the infamous 10 Bears, Morgan State Bears lacrosse team. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing quite well. And yourself, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Sorry about the connection that we had here, but we're a lot better now.
Most definitely.
All right. So I wanted to bring you on here today because upon me doing a little bit of research, I stumbled across a little bit of information. And the information that I found, like a lot of people, once I've been talking about in the barbershop and things like that, a lot of people never heard of the 10 Bears. And I believe that's a story that we hear in the city, and not even here also in the city, but in the United States, because it's a part of America's history, is the 10 Bears. And what you guys did back in the 70s was remarkable. And I would like to talk about that a little bit and try to bring that to light a little bit to our guest today. And let's talk about what y'all accomplished during the 70s, especially in 1975.
Thank you. Yeah, the program ran from 1970 to 1981. 1970 was the club team, and so the first varsity year was 1971. The first and only varsity lacrosse team at the HBCU, so we were the only black college varsity lacrosse team in the nation, I guess also in the world, for that fact. A lot of guys came out of Baltimore City, with some guys out of New York, and there were two coaches. Coach Chip Silverman, he coached from 1970 to 1975, and then Coach Sheldon Freed, he coached from 1976 to 1981. We accomplished some great things. Again, a lot of the guys who came from Baltimore didn't pick up a stick until they were in the 10th grade in high school. We beat some major colleges. We beat some established programs. We beat some people who took us for granted. Now, granted, there was a trade-off. Many of our guys had not picked up a stick until later in life, versus the people that we were playing had a stick in their hands since they were 5 years old. But back then, lacrosse was a little bit more physical. So to the extent that we didn't have the legacy and hours of stick work, we had the athleticism and we had the physicality. We couldn't do all the most of our guys could not do all the great dynamic things with the stick. But then from the physical standpoint, if you exerted enough physical pressure on someone over the course of the game, that often kind of leveled the playing field, if you will. So we had the athleticism and also the drive. Some guys had a chip on their shoulder. Again, it was the 1970s. So just the post-King assassination years. You've got the whole thing of racial unrest. You've got the whole situation of black existentialism, where blacks, particularly black men, were trying to establish their identity. If you think about the images in the early 1970s, you have the Superfly, you have the Shaft, you have the Mac, you have the Fred Williamson, you have the Jim Kelly movies. These were all attempts for black men, black people in general, and black men in particular, to go through an existential experience to try to define themselves. That to the extent that we didn't control the power, we weren't part of the main power structure. These are ways of trying to find positivity in being a black person. You think of the songs in the late 60s, James Brown, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. The whole saying is black is beautiful, Jesse Jackson in his slogans. So it was a time of black, I'm using the term black existentialism, the time of kind of defining one's identity. Now, certainly as we're now in our 60s and 70s, we realize now the impact that we had now as opposed to back then. Back then we were guys we playing a sport that we loved. And of course, since we were the only black team, all the teams we played were white. We won some major ones, and then in the years of growing pains, we lost some. But overall, it was an excellent experience. The guys were really sad when the program had to go away in 1981. You mentioned 1975. That's the victory over Washington and Lee. Was one of the top teams in the nation. And no one expected these guys from Baltimore City, who all their socks didn't match, and some of their helmets had paint and duct tape on them. Certainly no one expected these guys to come from Baltimore City and beat probably at that time the top team in the nation. But that was a great victory for Morgan State. It's the impact of the victory has gained in resonance and importance over the decades. Uh, Back then when it happened, I wasn't on that team. I played on the team in 1977 and 1978. But the 1975 team, oh yeah, the team itself was happy. And then since that time, uh, the importance of that has resonated to say, well, we're just as good as anybody else. If we give us an even playing field, give us the same rules, give us the same opportunity, uh, and some guys had excellent stick work, particularly the guys that came out of New York. But what we may not have had in excellent stick work, you had heart and desire.
And
So it was an excellent experience.
and that's what they say it is. What is it? 90% mental, 10% skill.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So what was like I know back then it probably, a little bit hard recruiting and things like that. And a lot of guys, but a lot of people don't know about the state of Maryland and in the history of lacrosse in the state of Maryland, how it been around, if I'm not mistaken, from back when Maryland first became, a state here, like maybe like 1800s or something like that. So lacrosse have a big history here in Maryland. So how was recruiting back then, trying to get guys that, back that time is football or basketball, or you had like, baseball, for the fact. But I know I seen, I seen one interview where it was, some guys just, they just were so happy to want to play because they probably never played before, but they got to go against other opponents that didn't look like them. So let's talk
Right.
about that a little bit.
That's an excellent question. Recruiting. Um, Well, the team basically started in 1970 with guys who had played against each other in high school. That's the key thing and to your point, that lacrosse is probably the number one sport in Maryland. Um, Johns Hopkins in Maryland, going back to, I don't know if the late 1800s or early 1900s,
Hmm.
but Maryland and Hopkins have been playing lacrosse for a long time. Many colleges in the Maryland area play lacrosse. Maryland, Johns Hopkins, Loyola, Navy, Towson, UMBC. Um, so with Morgan's program starting, it started with a group of guys, primarily Dr. Miles Harrison, and I think also Mr. Val Emery, guys who had played in Baltimore City and and many of us had played against one another and said, hey, let's form a team. We want to do this. Uh, as I understand, a lot of the the early recruits came from the football team. Uh, for them, that many of them had never picked up a stick before, so lacrosse was something for them to do to stay in shape until football season, and also it allowed hitting. I think there was one gentleman by the name of Stan Cherry who was on the Morgan football team. He eventually wound up playing for the Baltimore Colts. So recruiting, you had the guys from Baltimore. Eventually, Coach Silverman uh, recruited some guys from New York, particularly Hampstead, New York. Have you heard of an actor called Method Man
Yes.
or Clifford Smith? He played at Hampstead. He actually played lacrosse. I don't know how many folks know that, but he was a lacrosse player for Hampstead. Well, some guys who preceded him, a guy named Dave Raymond, who came out of Hampstead, he came down from New York. He was a two-time All-American. So we over the course of the years, we got some excellent recruits from New York because you think about Jim Brown, who played at Syracuse. These guys, these were blacks who basically started in lacrosse at a very young age, unlike Baltimore. So we had primarily Baltimore, guys from New York. Once in a while, we get some guys from maybe Philadelphia or Virginia, but primarily Baltimore and New York, and New Jersey. New Jersey. Yeah, we got a fair number of guys from New Jersey who played up there. Um, but it's actually, if you talk about recruiting, particularly at HBC, it's two sides of that coin, because you have recruiting, but then you also have retention. So keep in
Okay.
mind that um, that was, I guess, because Vietnam was ended around 1974. So as the program went throughout that entire period, you had some guys who couldn't play all 4 years because they needed money. So they stopped college to go to work, or they went into the military. So yeah, so in answer to your question, recruiting was challenging, but even more challenging was keeping somebody up there for 4 years. Because a lot of guys, they may have had kids, they may have, or their parents needed money in the household. So it was challenging for guys to stay up there 4 whole years. So yeah, recruiting wasn't like recruiting was an ongoing thing. And to your point, there were some guys from out of state who had never played the game before, saw us, said, "Hey, let me give it a shot." I think of one gentleman who just entered the Morgan State Athletic Hall of Fame, Andre Wickham. He came to Morgan the same year I did, 1976, but he came with a football scholarship. Um, he knew a couple of guys on the football team, particularly Mr. Joe Folks, who was an All-American in football and lacrosse. They talked him into coming out, and Andre, had never played before, but because of his natural athleticism, became a very good defenseman. So to your point, recruiting primarily Baltimore, New York, and New Jersey, those were the key areas. Recruiting may have been tough at times. Scholarships were few. And then after you get a guy, the key thing is trying to keep him in school, either academically or to make sure that try to find work study or try to keep him in a position where he can also keep some money in his pocket. So it was tough. And also, those were the key issues: retention. I mean, recruitment and retention.
Exactly. And I bet that, pretty much was tough, especially trying to fill the stands. But going back to your point about a lot of guys, coming for football and then playing lacrosse or vice versa, I read somewhere that Jim Brown said that he thought he was more so probably a better lacrosse player than he was a football player.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends that, that's how I got in. I never played lacrosse, but I was a fan of it because I had a lot of friends coming up, had friends that played in high school, middle school, and also in high school that end up going to playing football for some different schools or colleges and things like that. And high school that I went to, Walbrook Senior High School, back in the 90s, we had two girls that played on the men's lacrosse team back in, from ninth grade on all the way up to 12th grade. And I think in middle school, Calverton Middle School had maybe one or two females that played at that time as well. So lacrosse is, it was always like you say, a physical sport. Some people can play it. Some people like, I don't want to get hit by those sticks and things, but it's an exciting sport. And it's kind of like laid out a little bit, kind of sort of like football with a little bit of mix of basketball with scoring and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what brought you to lacrosse?
I started playing in high school, Northwestern High School. I've always loved sports, always loved playing sports. My challenge was I was never really any good. When it came to athletic ability and physical coordination, I got left out of the gene pool on that. But I love sports, even though I was not very good at it. I loved playing it. So I started my junior year, and I played junior varsity in my junior year in high school, and then my varsity my senior year. I tried out in the ninth grade. I went to one practice, and I said, okay. And that's when we had the old sticks in ninth grade. I was in 1972, and we had these big sticks, and it was two things. I had never used a stick before, and the ground was muddy. And that's hard to try to scoop when the ground is dry. So I didn't have any cleats on. I just walked out with some gym shorts and tennis shoes. So I've got gym shorts, tennis shoes, a big heavy wooden stick, and mud. Now you do the math.
It sounds like there's a little bit of disaster, a recipe for it.
Yeah. So I went to one practice, and that was it. But I tried to get in 11th grade, and then also in the 12th, and just continue and played 77 and 78 at Morgan State. So I drew the short strides relates to athleticism, but I love to be out there with the fellas. I love to hit, and if I can hit somebody, or set a pick or set a screen, because it's the key thing about lacrosse. You may have 10 superstars, but there's only one ball. It's like basketball, like the All-Star game. There's only one ball. But if you have somewhat of a servant spirit or unselfish spirit, you can say, okay, I can't help over here, but I can help over there. Okay, I may not be able to run fast or cradle the ball or do all these fancy things, but set a pick, set a screen, help somebody else. My coach told me one time, Brian, my college coach, Coach Sheldon Free, told me, Brian, I appreciate you coming out. This was years later, saying, even though you knew you probably weren't going to get in the game, I appreciate you coming to practice every day. Because see, what a lot of people don't realize is the stars need somebody to practice against. You see everybody who's really great. They may have the talent and the physical aptitude and the mentality, but the bottom line is, I don't care how good you are, you have to practice. and you will not play any better than you practice. So even though I know he was trying to assuage my feelings and all that, but still he had a valid point that part of a team is everyone can't be a star, and if it's no more than giving someone else someone to practice against, that's also important. So it kind of gives you a broad sense of team. So the thing that drew me was the camaraderie, the chance to hang out with the fellas. Even though I didn't have a lot to contribute physically, I enjoyed being out there. And now, 40 years later, we now see the significance of what we did.
Exactly. I mean, you look at down south, and you see these movies about basketball, and you see movies about also football. Great stories about great teams back then, but you don't see as many good things coming out of Baltimore. Is kind of like negative stereotypes, or like you want to go back in history, but they don't look at the great things that came out here, like the 10 Bears and things like that. Walter P. Carter, with the Gwen Falls Park and things like that back in the day. So it's great to see a lot of people, finding out a little bit about history, like you say, maybe 40 years later, things like that, but it's still there. And that's why we're here to tell these stories. And it's great that we still have people here that was there during that time to actually be able to put the stories out. So back then, how was it trying to get fans inside the stand? Because, you have other big sports, you had a lot of, guys coming from out of the NFL, from Morgan State, coming from Morgan State, going to the NFL and things like that. So what was, the fan base like back then? Because, lacrosse, like, oh man, black guys playing lacrosse, we're not trying, see that, we want to see some football.
Your point is well taken, particularly if you're talking about lacrosse at an HBCU, because lacrosse was seen as a white sport.
Yes.
So lacrosse at Morgan State, I would dare say, if I can speak honestly, was tolerated but never loved.
Okay.
Because keep in mind, for an HBCU, it's important to have street cred. It's important to have that football program and basketball program and track program, particularly football program. And here's why. Football was not only a revenue sport, but it was also a recruiting tool. For say for example, you had a Leroy Kelly, or Frenchie. I think Frenchie Fuqua also went there. But say they graduate from Morgan and they make the pros. From a PR standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, the athletic department can now go to your local high schools and say, hey, Leroy Kelly, who's now playing for the Cleveland Browns, played at Morgan State. If you come to Morgan State, you can also be the next Leroy Kelly. So from the standpoint of developing an athletic program and football program, football generates revenue. Football also it can be used as a tool for recruiting other people. Lacrosse was a non-revenue generating sport, and lacrosse itself was always very expensive. You could easily spend $200 in order to buy equipment, spend on equipment just to outfit a lacrosse player. The sticks are expensive, the helmets, but basketball, that's lunch money.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get sponsored.
A helmet, a cheap helmet that will give you a concussion, you get that anywhere. But lacrosse, so you have an expensive sport that doesn't generate that does not generate revenue, and is discordant with the cultural environment.
Exactly.
Yeah. So so in terms of the fan base, well, based upon that, a team was from 1970 to 1981. As best I remember, at least during my time there, we were not allowed to play in the stadium.
Wow.
Because the stadium, they didn't want the lacrosse team messing up the turf. Because, and if I put on my football hat, my athletic department hat, I understand that. Because if you make your money off of football, you're gonna protect that from end to end. In fact, there were coaches who tried to keep football players from playing lacrosse, or tried to get them to quit the team. So I mean, I don't agree with that, but if I put myself in the other person's shoes, if I'm running an athletic department at a historically black college, I've got to go with what, I'm not going to spend money where I don't make money.
Exactly. Exactly.
And lacrosse made no money. So you have lacrosse, which is expensive, and made no money. It was tough. So in terms of the fan base, what guys would do sometimes on game day, if it was a home game, they wear their jerseys to class.
Okay.
So that way, or they walk across the campus with the sticks to kind of show, hey, we're out here, come see us. So there were some people over time that would come and check the games out. Friends and girlfriends of the guys. Um, I think the guys before I got there, they would put signs up on the campus saying, "Hey, come check out the lacrosse team." So there were efforts. It did have somewhat of a fan base, but it wasn't huge. I think the largest fan base often we had was when a big name school would come to Morgan, and that is the fact. So you said fans, not so much the Morgan fans, but the fans of
Yeah.
the visiting team. In 1981, Notre Dame came to Morgan and Morgan beat them.
Okay.
Uh, and so a lot of times when visiting teams would come to Morgan, those teams were supported by their fans, so those fans would come. And the fact, and even though there were tough times in the '70s and the post-King era, all the fans were not hostile. You think black fans, white team, yeah, with any sport, you're going to get a few knuckleheads in the crowd. But for the most part, they want pitchforks and torches sitting there. I mean, you may have some sketchy moments, or if you're playing somebody, and he knows that he's either beating them up or you're getting the best of him. He may say a few things, to kind of mess with your head.
Try to get you off your game.
Sure, yeah. If you can't dominate a man's body, you dominate his mind.
Exactly,
Right?
and that's one of the best. Yeah, exactly, and that's like Mike Tyson, the big
Yeah.
prime example. He
Yeah,
dominated.
Mike Tyson walk out black shoes and no socks. Now, come on, man.
He won already right then and there. I'm not
Yeah,
fighting this guy.
exactly. But
Eh,
in terms of fans, so not a whole lot of Morgan fans. Often, if we're visiting teams, you get most of those fans. But there was a cultural and business reason for why Morgan really did not promote lacrosse at the time.
Yeah, and then you look at it. Fast forward now, and let's fast forward to like maybe early 2000s, and when the story really started coming alive a lot more. You had ESPN and things like that, PBS and people like that, and now it's like you're saying, putting light on Morgan State back then and what that they was doing. Now if they can go back then and think about like, man, we should have put a little bit more into this lacrosse team, but everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. I'm thinking, how it's supposed to happen in life. And probably all of that had to happen for us to be here at this moment, still talking about something that happened 40 years ago that a lot of people didn't really know much about.
Right. Our program and the victory of the Washington League has grown over time. Was it back in 2015? U.S. Lacrosse, which is now known as USA Lacrosse, when they created their new museum and Hall of Fame, they actually established a permanent exhibit for our team. So
Wow.
if you ever go out to Sparks, Maryland, to the U.S. Lacrosse Museum and Hall of Fame, ask them to show you the Morgan State Lacrosse exhibit. In fact, on top of the exhibit is a big plastic M with my varsity letter on it. And I'm always proud of that because you're looking at a guy who didn't have athletic ability, but through divine favor, my varsity letter is in the U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Also, outside of the building itself, they have a series of dedicatorial bricks. You'd have to search real hard, but there's also a brick in honor of our team. Yeah, the who the team is has grown in stature over time. But the key thing is, most of us again are in our 60s and 70s. We're just happy to still be here, because we don't necessarily equate ourselves with the Tuskegee Airmen, but but we're still young enough. We're in our 60s and 70s, but we're still involved in the game. The program started at Hampton was started by a guy I played against in high school and played with at Morgan, Coach Louis Carter. He started the Hampton program. He started as a club team, and eventually they jumped straight to D1. Coach
Wow.
Chaz Woodson is the coach there now. So Hampton is there because of Morgan State. And
Wow.
basically, in the middle school leagues in Baltimore City in the 1980s, 90% of those coaches had all played together at Morgan State.
Wow.
And even
That's
now in
great.
Baltimore City, the coach of the city high school, Coach Merck Ryan, Morgan State. Edmondson, Coach Gene White, Morgan State. I think in Randallstown, Coach Michael Carrington, Morgan State. So it's a lot of guys. Donnie Brown, who's all over this region, is still actively playing. I think up in New York, Mendoza Wallace, he's in his late 60s, still playing club ball. So
Wow.
basically like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yeah, if you could trace a lot of stuff back to what we did. We may
Wow.
not still be on the field, but we're still in the game.
Wow. And not even in the game, you always, and then you got your mark in history. It's
Yeah,
always going to go down in history. And like you say, you started off from a gentleman going onto the field and not knowing much about lacrosse to now having your varsity ladder still hanging up there in memorial right now. So that's great. I mean, who would say, from you looking back from then starting off playing, just probably just look at this something to play, something to do, get a little bit of frustration off to now to being basically the spokesperson for the 10 Bears, if you must say.
well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm one of several spokespersons. I'll put it
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Don't get me killed, brother.
Yeah, no, no, I want to have you back on again. So I'm
No, no,
one
no.
of the spokespersons. Please do not kill him.
I'm one of many.
Exactly. I mean, and it's great though. It's great that you still can be sitting here and talking about it. And the gentleman, y'all still name is going to be, with enshrined pretty much until the test of time. Grandkids, great grandkids, always going to know about lacrosse because, like I say, this state is basically been one of the top sports here in this state. And if
Yep.
I'm not mistaken, it's crazy. It should be the state sport, but I think jousting is, and I don't even know the last time I even seen a joust. Except for
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I think it was the late '80s, early '90s. I actually was involved, submitted a bill to City Hall for them to make lacrosse the state sport instead of jousting. I think the bill died on the floor, but at least I gave it a shot because you know I, no everybody plays lacrosse in Maryland.
yeah,
From each end of it, lacrosse is the sport. It's played pretty much all year long now because they play by club teams, rec teams. Um, yeah, so but to your point, yeah, we're just thankful that we are still here and around to still try to influence and promote the game at whatever level we can.
exactly. And then, speaking about you saying about Hampton, and also one of the players that played with Morgan State, his son played for John Hopkins or something, if I'm not mistaken. He was like one of the top players at John Hopkins.
Right, Dr. Miles Harrison, he was one of the
Yeah.
co-founders of the team, and his son Kyle Harrison was, I think, Kyle made it All American at least twice, if not three times, and he won the Tuaraton Award his senior year. Yeah, so he was the known as his last year at Hopkins. He was ranked as the top lacrosse player in the nation that year. He just retired from playing in the PLL.
Wow, that's great. I mean, look. I mean, if you just look at just the branch in the tree of Morgan State and how all the leaves and everything just went into play, and then that Morgan State basically the foundation of if you look at HBCU, the lacrosse. Basically it's like the godfather of it. If you must say.
Yeah, yeah, we'll take that. Yeah, we will gladly accept that.
Exactly. Man, this has been great. I would love to have, you guys on, going more in depth, about some games and things like that, and back during that time on like the culture of that time and how was, family take the thing, playing lacrosse and to like now, what you guys are doing now and what guys from that era, what they was doing up to that time and what did lacrosse help them, more so in life and things like that.
Well, a lot of the guys, we're all now between 60 and 70, so most of
Yeah.
the guys are retired. I'm still working, but I'm able to work from home. So it works out well for me. Several of the guys from Baltimore went to the fire department. Um, yeah, probably about 10 guys went to the fire department. A couple went to the police department and the penitentiary system. Basically, it kept them doing something physical.
Yes.
Um, a lot some guys who are coaching, permanently. Um, yeah, but a good chunk of the guys are retired. So yeah, I think most of the guys are retired, and they're just kind of doing their thing here and there. Most
Okay.
a good chunk are still in Baltimore, and obviously before pre-COVID, we'd all try to get together for some events, maybe once or twice a year. In fact, if I could put in a plug, um,
Sure,
if
go ahead.
anyone, if you have access to Facebook, we have a team group page out there. You can ask for membership, and then on the team group page, on the section called Files, there's a whole series of, there's a PDF out there with about 60 different links to web-based resources. I've got about 50 Morgan State lacrosse videos out there, or even if you go up to YouTube and search my name, Brian Beverly, and go to my YouTube channel, you'll probably see close to about 30, 40, maybe 30 or 40 Morgan State videos. There's actually a game video from 1980. There might be a game video from 1974. Or that may be a different link, but yeah. But we've done a lot in the last, what is this, 2022? We've done a lot in the last 7 years in catching up.
Well, that's great. Like I said, it is a lot. Like I went on YouTube and I seen actually some video of the Washington Lee University game, little clips of it from what was that, I think the ESPN or something like that. So it is a lot of video. Like I mean, I sat here one night and I'm doing research for another interview, and I just got caught and just watching and seeing some of these past interviews and learning a lot of things about Morgan State that I didn't even know. So I mean, I'm grateful that I came across this information, and I'm grateful.
And it also helps to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I'm saying, and I'm also grateful that for you to come on and actually speak about it as well.
My pleasure. And to kind of tie this in with what's going on today, if you've been watching the television and watching the news situations of inequities and missed opportunities of coaching in the NFL. One of the things, if you have a doubt that we're not good enough, look at us.
I mean, they talk about
and got the opportunity.
Exactly.
You can get it done.
And they talk about American history, but then we got Black History Month, and I don't believe you can't have American history without having Black history, because it wouldn't be a lot of American history if it wasn't for Black history. So I mean, it has to be a part of the conversation.
There would be none, because keep in mind, slavery was the economic engine for the United States, because we exported cotton and sugar over to Europe. So basically, the gross domestic product, or even the gross national product, if you consider adding trade to the equation, of the United States in the 19th century was built. The Industrial Revolution, the United States became a geopolitical power because of slavery.
Exactly.
So to your point, this country was built off of the backs of Black folks. So,
exactly, with no recognition, and maybe 1 month and then a holiday, but we don't get the recognition, and especially like within schools, coming up in elementary and middle school, they had to put a stop to no more Martin Luther King, no more Rosa Parks and things like that during Black History Month during reports. So, but if we didn't have a lot of information out there, to find out about other different people, to find out, who else to write about, who else to talk about. And that's why I'm trying to be here to help out other people that things they don't know about. Like you don't have to look out of Maryland and look out of Baltimore to find some Black history. A lot of people don't know the Black Panthers had a headquarters here in Maryland, in Baltimore. So there's a lot of things that people don't know, a lot of things about history here in the city.
Right. Yeah. All the above and beyond all the negative headlines, and certainly there's a fair amount of dysfunctionality and bad things that have generationally happened in Baltimore. There have also been some good things. And
exactly.
We made a lot of solid contributions. So this whole thing belongs to all of us, good and bad.
Exactly. And we need, we have to get the word out and try to get more positive look on the city of Baltimore, because we, it's not always, negative things. We have a lot of good days here in Baltimore that can overcast the bad days.
Yep.
Exactly. So it's definitely been a pleasure. If anything, you have, like you say, have going on, plug anything, Facebook page, anything you want to plug, so people can get in contact with you guys and find out more about the 10 Bears.
Well, again, if you go out to Facebook and look for the Morgan State 10 Bears group page, I'm the administrator of the page. If you'd like to become a member, just answer the questions, and you'll more than likely, unless there's something really bad, if someone I don't know, I may take a quick look at their page, and if someone wants to get on our page or your page looks a little sketchy, I may turn it down. But outside of that, as long as you as long as your page is
No
fine.
spam.
Right, yeah. So as long as you're cool, I'm cool, and you'll have access to I'll use the word goo gobs. It's a whole lot of information, photos. Again, I have PDFs with videos of about 60 different videos, and also other internet links of information on the team. And also go out to YouTube, look for my channel, you can also see the videos out there as well.
And like say you guys go out there, go to Facebook and look up for the, 10 bears. I say you can go in there. There's a lot of great information on there. I've seen news articles, like you say, clips and things like that. So, maybe during this time now and your kids have something that, they have to do reports on Black history. Here's something right here. Morgan State 10 bears, Mr. Brian Beverly. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And I'm glad that you stopped by.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
No problem. And you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Yes, sir. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, you stopping by. Take this video off. I really appreciate you stopping by, sir. I really appreciate it. It's definitely been an honor. All right, audio. There we go. Yeah, I think the audio went out. So if you can hear me, because your sound going out, I'll send you an email again. We could reach back out and have try to have maybe a reunion for you guys, since you say since there's been COVID and you haven't yet be able to talk to these guys in a while. So maybe